All right, class, welcome back. This is our Week 7 introduction. This is your professor, Dr. Brant Ellsworth, sharing a little bit about your reading assignments, some of my reflections, and providing an overview for your assignments. Week 7, one of my favorites, is in Chapter 10 of the American Yap. It's looking at the role of religion. Religion. Last week in our readings, we looked at the market revolution and the changes that were wrought by advancements made in transportation. We looked at changes in the Erie Canal, the development of the railroad system. We noted how that created shortened the travel times between urban industrial centers and those rural agrarian farmers out far from the cities. In a way, this created a flattening of the American populace. It allowed for the quick spread of communication ideas, and it brought a revolution to those people who lived in rural parts of the country. They were no longer strangers. They were no longer out of the loop. But suddenly they had the same access to educational opportunities, again, to economic prosperity through the use of trade and manufacturing. And following on the footsteps of these things was the expansion of religion. This period of American history, the 1810s and 1820s, is often referred to religiously as the Great Awakening. As Protestant religions, the Baptists, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, had fiery preachers who would travel the countryside giving these outdoor lectures and speeches calling people to repentance. It created a great excitement in these small communities. As more people learned to read, as more people had access to things like a family Bible, religion was one of the first things that spread, and Americans became hyper-religious. This was an era in which we see the establishment of many new religions, organizations like the Shakers. The Mormon religion was established in 1820s and 1830s in this very same region of upstate New York. And we see religion playing an important role both among the populace but also in the worlds of politics. Suddenly, this new awareness of religion, of right and righteousness, led many people to question how American society had advanced in the previous 150 years. For instance, many people looked at the place of slaves and found contradicting messages in the New and Old Testament. While some would point to the slavery of the children of Israel, others would talk about Jesus' commandments to treat your neighbor as yourself and to love God and to love your neighbor. And many people questioned how one could love their neighbor if their neighbor was a slave and was treated poorly. So in this way, religion not only changes the way that communities establish and think about themselves, but it also was a precedent to bring about a great sense of reformation, that change was needed, and specifically that a change in slavery was needed. We see in the early work of people like William Lloyd Garrison, who was one of the first, most prominent abolitionists, we see as early as the 1830s a growing anxiety and desire for lasting change. Not all people, though, drew fondly upon the religious messages that were spread by these Protestant messengers. Many people, including, as we'll read this week, the writings of Henry David Thoreau or Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson is the first. Thoreau is essentially a disciple of Emerson. Emerson comes into the scene in the 1830s, and he speaks about the love for nature. He sees in nature not what his ancestors saw, right, as we talked about in our first and second weeks, how many European colonists saw America, the land, to be wild and uncivilized, its people in need of civilization, of language, of learning. To the contrary, Emerson and Henry David Thoreau would see natural beauty and would argue that nature did more to bring man closer to God than anything that man had created. In a way, he is responding negatively to the increase in industrialization and manufacturing in his hometown. He lives outside of Boston, and he sees a growing dependence upon manufacturing. He notes growing pollution and argues that instead of tearing down the natural resources of the world in order to make products for our homes, Emerson believes that we should go out, and it's there in nature, that we become, as he puts it, the all-seeing eye, the translucent eye. It is there in nature that we are most likely to see the hand of God, and in seeing it are most likely to see the hand of God in our lives. Emerson himself was a religious man. He was a preacher. He'd graduated from Harvard Divinity School. But he has a coming to and decides that he does not want to be a paid minister, but instead becomes a minister of nature. His disciple Henry David Thoreau will famously camp out on Walden Pond for a year, talking about the role of nature in shaping the way that he experienced the world. As you will read in his article, Thoreau's Reflections on Nature, you will get a sense of Emerson and Thoreau's love. It's what we call transcendentalism. This week, your assignments include a reading quiz, a timed reading quiz, and a primary source analysis. I've been overall very pleased with your work here. Just a reminder to not take shortcuts, that you will get from these assignments what you put into them. Again, please continue working on your final projects. They will be due here in a few weeks. Make sure that you are conducting your original research. A reminder that you will need both primary and secondary sources. Should you have any questions about anything, as always, send me an email. My address is brantellsworth@centralpenn.edu. All right, signing off. This is your professor. Have a great week.